Children's Playground, written by Crying Crow. This story is 100% true. Although I was only 8 years old at the time, I can recollect every chilling detail. I'd moved to a new town, and this one was much nicer, cleaner, and a quieter town than the one I'd lived at before. Not the sort of town that you'd expect to have things go wrong with. There was a very big public park right in the center. It housed rows upon rows of swings, slides infested with snake-like tunnels that weaved in and around the playground, providing a maze for children to lose themselves in their games. There was even a functioning merry-go-round, which seemed to always be slightly turning, inviting the children to hitch a ride on its platform of twirls. I have to emphasize on the fact that it was a quiet, peaceful town. The kind of town where kids could leave the house on their own and take the short journey to the park. I had been given strict instructions by my parents that I should come home the second it started getting dark. My life was wonderful, or so it seemed. It was a Friday. I knew the day because I remember coming home with a big smile on my face, as I knew I had the luxury of non-stop playing for the next 2 whole days. I did what I always did. I chucked my school bag on my bed and was ordered to change into other clothes. In a matter of minutes, I was ready to descend onto the world of fun. Nothing could stop me. The tunnels were my favorite. It was so easy to get lost in them, which made great fun for playing hide and seek with my only 2 friends, Billy and Tom. They were both in my class, and we, like many 8-year-olds, loved any game that filled us with pure adrenaline. We were going to play murder. I don't expect anyone to know this game, and we made it up. The rules were very similar to hide and seek, except when the one seeking found you, they had to murder you. It was obviously pretend. It was nearing winter, as I remember being slightly cold as I wormed my way around in the tunnels, furiously trying to find a perfect hiding spot. Billy was the seeker. Tom had hidden behind the merry-go-round. I was alone. It must have been maybe 10 minutes, which for an 8-year-old felt like a year, when I decided to do what all kids do when they get bored: give up. I shouted, "I give up," my voice echoing through the tunnels. "I'm in the tunnels. I give up." I heard sudden shuffling from one end of the tunnel. Now, I don't know why, but I froze still. I didn't call out again. I just waited. Something wasn't right. Billy would always say something before coming in after someone in the tunnel. He'd always congratulate them on being the last to be found, or for cheating by hiding in the endless maze of tunnels. As I stood frozen, the shuffling grew louder. I could tell that it was starting to get dark outside, as the tunnels slowly began to lose any light in them. Slowly but surely, dropping into darkness. I began to slowly shuffle backwards. The shuffling ahead of me grew louder, as if someone, or something, way too big for the tunnel, was trying to navigate around. "Come out, it's time to go home now." A very creepy voice echoed through the tunnel. It sounded like when a grown man talks to children, talking slightly higher pitched. This was definitely wrong. I probably would have come out if the voice was outside, but it wasn't. It was inside the tunnels. Why would an adult crawl inside? As I was shuffling further and further back, the face of an old man appeared in the darkness ahead of me. Patches of hair on his head, and a definite look of someone who hadn't showered in the last week. I couldn't see what he was wearing, but I knew it was tattered old clothes. He had a sharp, scraggly beard, which was peppered with dirt. The second we had made eye contact, he just smiled at me, revealing his filthy, unbrushed teeth, which had blotches of brown and black covering them entirely. I panicked, turned around, and began shuffling on all fours as fast as I could, the shuffling behind me growing louder and quicker. He was chasing me. I sped through the maze for what felt like an eternity. I only stopped when my legs refused to move anymore. I'd taken so many twists and turns that even I was completely lost. "I don't want to hurt you. I just want to talk." The voice echoed through the tunnels. I could tell he was nearby. I pressed my body against the bottom of the small, narrow tunnel and listened. He continued to make soft, cooing noises, begging me to come out and present myself to him. I lay in that tunnel for hours. No exaggeration. Even after I heard him curse to himself and angrily force his way out of the tunnel, I continued to wait. Thoughts raced in my mind of me coming out of the tunnel only to be met by that same smile that once greeted me. In the darkness of the tunnel, I could make out blue flashing lights on the outside. I heard frantic voices calling 3 names rapidly. Billy, Tom, Michael. When I heard my name, my heart slowly began to calm. My parents had come. I easily shuffled out of the tunnels, guided by the wet dirt scrapings along the walls of the tunnel, the way the man must have gone. Outside, I was greeted by several police cars, lights flashing. There were groups of adults with concerned looks on their faces. I recognized 2 of them, my parents. "Mom, Dad," I wailed, crying as I ran towards them. They began crying and ran towards me, lifting me off the ground and hugging me so tightly, it felt as though I was being slowly crushed. Billy and Tom were taken that evening. They were later found, hidden in a nearby skip, mutilated. They had been brutally massacred. Their skulls had been caved in with a large iron bar, and their bodies had deep cuts everywhere, large pieces of glass found buried in their backs. What chills me to the fucking bone is that the wet dirt that I saw in the tunnels wasn't entirely dirt. It was Billy and Tom's blood. After slaughtering my 2 best friends and making eye contact with me in that tunnel, he just smiled. He had won the game. I used to work as a mortician, and there's something that funeral homes don't tell you. Written by TRMBC. I quit my job as a mortician a few years ago, and all the people who knew me are now dead. So I think it's a good time to tell you a very well-kept secret. But before I get into the main story, let me tell you why I became a mortician in the first place. My grandpa's body was found inside his house, dead. It was presumed he had died 2 days before, as that had been how long since he hadn't answered the phone. My mother was in charge of the funeral arrangements, and per my grandpa's request, the viewing would be in his house. He had also requested that he not be embalmed, for he found it unnatural. And so the family gathered in his house, full of flowers to cover the stench of death. We all cried and wished we had just a little more time with him. The thing is, our wish came true much too quickly. As one of my aunts approached his body, she screamed and ran out of the house. When we all turned to the direction of my grandpa's body, he was sitting up. His gaze was distant, undisturbed by the hysteria that his resurrection had caused. Doctors explained to us that he had a rare case of someone with Lazarus syndrome. Besides that, there wasn't any other explanation. He didn't live long after this incident. He would eat, sleep, and sometimes smile, but he never spoke again. It felt as if my grandpa had lost all that made him, well, himself. By his second death, my mother ignored his previous wishes and had him embalmed. Some family members joked that we should just put a bell on his tomb, just in case he woke up again. But I'm not sure how much of it was an actual joke. His first and second death made me curious about what happens after. Was there an afterlife? Did we reincarnate? Or did we just rot away into nothingness? The whole religious aspect of it bore me, but the process of death and how the body is handled after drew me in. The turnover rate for morticians is rather high, so I felt especially proud when I obtained my bachelor's degree and was quickly accepted into an internship. I was stupid. I thought I was better than all those people who quit as soon as they realized a dead body is more than just a piece of meat. Now I realize that they were the smart ones for leaving and finding any other profession in the world. At the beginning of my internship, there were 6 of us. We were given some of the worst bodies to work with in order to weed out even more people. I almost quit when I had to reconstruct the face of a 3-year-old girl who had been stabbed multiple times by her father. The mother still went with a closed casket funeral, but she thanked us for making her baby whole once again. By the end of the first year of internship, only 2 of us were left. The funeral director called us into his office, saying that he needed to talk to us. "Congratulations on completing your first year of the internship." The funeral director, Nav, sounded anything but happy. "Thank you," Gia and I said in unison. He didn't even look at us. He flipped through some paperwork and files. We just sat there, unsure of what to do, other than stare at each other. Outside the office, we could hear the creaky wheels of a gurney as someone transferred a fresh body into the fridges. I kind of hoped that Nav would let us go out soon. Being inside the office was much more nerve-wracking than trying to find what body part belonged where after someone had fallen into a wood chipper. "I need you both to stay overnight. Make the necessary arrangements. Today, you will figure out why people don't stay in the job. Now go." Nav dismissed us as he handed us some papers. "And please, make sure to sign all the paperwork." Gia made us both the elixir of the gods, coffee, to prepare us for the night. The paperwork made no sense. Most of it was legal jargon related to death and keeping confidentiality. Whatever happened tonight, we couldn't speak of it to anyone outside the people who worked there. "What could have been so bad that we had to sign so many papers?" Gia asked. "I have no idea, but I swear I just signed a paper giving the company the rights to my soul," I joked. "You still had one?" Gia laughed. We finished our lunch of coffee and headed back to the prep room. Our laughter quickly died as Nav stood by 4 corpses, ready for us to dig into. He took the papers from us, and his face somehow became more somber as he realized that we weren't backing out. This is your last chance to quit. There is no shame in it. Nav looked at us directly. I'm staying. My voice faltered, but I tried to look confident. Me too. Gia's voice trembled. He looked at us with pain in his eyes. At the time, I was confused, but again, I wished that I had taken the opportunity and left. But no, my pride kept me there, trying to prove a point that didn't even exist. Diana, take the 2 bodies to the right. Gia, get the 2 bodies on the left, Nav instructed. We quickly took our positions, somewhat confused on why we were working on 2 bodies at the same time. Their charts and all the sanitizing utensils were missing too. Gia and I looked at each other confused. Now, take their pulses, Nav instructed. What? I looked at him confused. Please, do as I say, and once you do, come sit with me. We'll have a talk, Nav said as he sat on one empty chair, pointed towards the bodies. Gia and I looked at each other, and reluctantly went to do as told. I first grabbed the wrist of a slim woman who looked to be in her 30s. A shiver ran down my body as the coldness of death touched my warm fingers. I was careful not to damage the skin as I pressed down to feel for a heartbeat. There was nothing. I let out a sigh of relief that I didn't know that I'd been holding on to. For the next body, I checked for a pulse from his neck, as both of his wrists had been damaged by some kind of knife. As I pressed down on his neck, I thought for a second that I felt a heartbeat. I backed away, knowing that was impossible. The rigidity of the body had started to go away as the muscles decomposed, but rigor mortis had already stiffened the body, suggesting that he had been dead for at least a day or 2. Nav looked at me, his eyes hiding something as he waved at me to go back to the body. I took a deep breath, trying to keep the paranoia at bay. I didn't allow my mind to wander much as I pressed my hand into the corpse's neck once more. There was nothing. I almost laughed at myself for freaking out. I had probably felt my own pulse when I touched his neck. Once done, Gia and I went to sit next to Nav, unsure of what to expect. For sure, it wasn't what he said next. Have you heard how Jesus came back to life 3 days after he was crucified? Nav started. We didn't respond. Sorry, I'm just not sure how to explain this. It's my first time explaining it to anyone. He took a pause. Gia and I looked at each other, probably thinking the same thing. Had Nav lost his mind? Should we get out of here while we still could? Diana, Gia, tonight will either be a rather eventful night, or it'll be pretty silent. Let's hope for the second, and that you just think I lost it. Nav laughed humorously. The hours passed, and we just sat there. Occasionally, I looked at my phone to doom scroll. Gia made us all a batch of coffee to make the sand of sleep fall from our eyes. The silence was bothering me, but when I tried to put on the headphones, Nav made me take them off. Then there was a sound. Was that a groan? I looked at the bodies in front of us and then at Nav. Nav looked intensely at the bodies. His eyes darted from one body to the next. I trembled, unsure of what was going on. And then, another groan. Nav reached down under his chair into a bag that I hadn't noticed before. He handed us each a knife and held one himself. "Wait, why do we—" Gia stopped. The man that I had felt a pulse from earlier that night was sitting up. He stared directly at us, but didn't look at us. His gaze seemed to travel somewhere else. I had seen this before, many, many years ago, with my grandpa. My bladder wanted to give out at that exact moment. This couldn't possibly be happening. "You two, stab that man in the heart," Nav ordered us. "I'm not going to kill him," I protested. "Why is he alive?" Gia sobbed. "He isn't alive. Or not in the way that you two are thinking about it. Now, put him to rest." Nav's voice wavered as he tried to stay calm. I'm not sure why I trusted him, but I started to walk towards the man that I knew had been dead just a few hours ago. As I approached, the man looked at me and gave me the smallest smile. He then turned his gaze once more into whatever he was looking at and ignored me. Gia attempted to approach, but nausea overtook her and she ran towards the nearest trash bin to throw up. In all the time that I had known Gia, she had never thrown up. She could easily have a meal in front of a fully open corpse. My hands trembled as I tried to place the knife where the heart was located. My own nausea begged for me to run to the nearest trash bin. Instead, I swallowed the vomit, trying to ignore the acidic aftertaste. I took a deep breath and steadied my hands, ready to plunge the knife into his heart. As the first piece of skin broke, the man turned his head towards me and, with impossible speed, grabbed my arm. I screamed as I tried to pull away my arm. As the man's expression turned into anger, he tried to bite my arm, but I pushed his head away with my other arm. Gia and Nav ran towards me. Gia attempted to free my arm from his grip. I cried and begged the man to let go. Nav somehow maneuvered the knife between the three tangled bodies and stabbed the man right through the heart. The man let go of my arm and slowly fell back into the gurney, leaving a bloody mess behind. "I'm so sorry you had to experience this, but there was no other way. If I tried to explain this, you wouldn't have believed me." Nav started to crumble. After this, I'm honestly not sure why I stayed. Nav explained to us that some people would come back on the third day, and if Jesus had been real, then that was probably what had happened to him too. Some returned peaceful, others would attack immediately. One thing was for sure, they weren't the same person that they had been before death. The best way to prevent this resurrection? Freezing and embalming the bodies. Our job was to prevent the dead from coming back, not prepare the bodies for the family to view. We were given a choice, to stay at work or quit. We would be helped to find a new job if we chose to quit. The only thing we couldn't do was talk about what had happened that night. The only ones who knew the secret were other morticians, and it was better if it stayed that way. Both of us decided to stay. As terrified as I was about what happened, I was also morbidly curious. At last, I was getting answers to what happens after death. Nav died a few years later. He took his own life, not being able to handle the pressure of the secret. I took over his position and trained new morticians. Gia was murdered by the husband of a woman whom he claimed Gia had killed when she woke up again. Now, here I am, no longer in the business, but still burdened with the knowledge. I have seen loved ones go, and I have made sure that they stay that way. Do what you want with this knowledge, but I do warn you, they won't come back the same. Let the dead people rest. Father's Day, written by L.J. Father's Day. Howard Simpkin was a quiet man, a nice man. Everybody said so. Who could have foreseen the future? Howard grew up in the small town of Dackenby, the son of average parents, of average wealth. In fact, everything about Howard's life was decidedly average. Even his job, an accountant. He was a stand-up comedian's wet dream. As a young man, Howard found it difficult mixing with others of his age, and therefore became a bit of a loner. His life, like his balance sheets, calculated to boredom, definitely into the minus column. That was until July of the summer of 1975, when he met Brenda, and the balance of his life finally moved firmly into the plus column. He fell in love with her immediately. Howard, however, had no hope of Brenda feeling the same way about him. How could she? Brenda, to look at, was nothing special. Most people wouldn't have given her a second chance. But to Howard, she was the air that he breathed, the sun that warmed him. One day, summoning all the courage he possessed, he asked Brenda out, and to his amazement, she agreed. Howard spent the rest of that day walking on air. To think that a beautiful woman like Brenda had agreed to go out with a nobody like him. His parents, who were kind people, took an instant dislike to Brenda from the start, which Howard couldn't understand as he was blinded by love and could see no wrong in her. Howard was not a wealthy man, but had saved most of his money up till now, as his lifestyle had been meager. This changed in the following months, when he started spending with vigor, his savings diminishing with every additional gift he brought for Brenda. The smile on her face is worth all that I own, he would tell others. However, Howard was aware of the gossip mongers, the troublemakers, who had nothing to do but spread their vicious rumor. They would say that Brenda was only with him for what she could get, that she was nothing but a gold digger. Shortly after his father died, Howard asked Brenda to marry him, but she said it was too soon, that she wasn't ready. Months after his father's death, his mother passed away too, as if her need to be reunited with her husband outweighed her need for life. Howard was left everything: the house, the car, and a sizable chunk of money from life insurance policies. These gains did nothing to ease his loss. He felt like his life was rapidly being drawn downwards, back into the minus column. Having nothing to lose except for rejection, he plucked up the courage to ask Brenda to be his wife. This time, to his overwhelming joy, she accepted. It seemed everyone knew what was going on, except poor old Howard. The gravy train had pulled up, and good old Brenda was determined to grab a first-class seat up front. For Howard, the wedding was one of the happiest days of his life. And Brenda? Well, Brenda turned up. For the first year of their marriage, everything seemed to be good. Howard still worshipped her and showered her with gifts. And then it happened. Brenda became pregnant. Howard was thrilled to bits, and Brenda was not. Talk of abortion from Brenda's lips. But for the first time in the relationship, Howard put his foot down. 8 months later, at 2:32 a.m., an 8-pound, 7-ounce baby girl was born. Emma Louise Simpkin, Howard's pride and joy. To Howard, Emma was a blessing. To Brenda, she was a rival for Howard's affections, and more importantly, his gifts. Things between Howard and Brenda went steadily downhill from the birth of their daughter. Brenda showed little to no interest in Emma, and spent more and more time going out for various reasons. She had disclosed to Howard, before they married, that both of her parents were dead, and that she had no family to speak of. Yet, all of a sudden, she had sick relatives all over the country that she just had to visit. Howard had also noticed Brenda was turning more heads lately, in part due to the fine clothes and expensive makeovers he paid for her. Slowly, he began to take over the role of mother, as well as that of provider, and due to his very understanding boss, he was able to do more and more of his work from home, in order to spend as much time as he could with his daughter. Over time, as Howard's love for his daughter grew, so did his hatred for Brenda. He wasn't stupid. He knew what she got up to on her little trips. He smelt the aftershave on her clothes. He noticed the smug look on her heavily made-up face. If it wasn't for Emma, his life would have been unbearable. Every year on Father's Day, Howard would stand Emma against the kitchen door and measure her height, making up a poem as he did and singing it to her. Emma always laughed and hugged her father, while her mother would stand and sneer, assuming of course that she was around that particular day. It was on one of those occasions that things changed. Emma was 9, and Howard had just measured her. Quiet Emma, so good, so sweet, 4'2" from head to feet, he sang. Emma, as usual, hugged her father and laughed. Brenda, on the other hand, appeared in the doorway, 2 suitcases by her side, the familiar sneer upon her face. She told him he was pathetic and that she was leaving him. She told him a few home truths that anybody in the town could and did tell him years ago. Brenda's leaving made no difference to Howard, as he had spent the best part of the last 7 years hating the sight of her, and from that day forward, she was referred to only as Burn in Hell Brenda. For years after her departure, everything was great. Emma was doing really well at school and became Howard's life. He worshipped her and showered her with love and gifts, as he had done once with Burn in Hell Brenda. Then things gradually started to change when Emma hit her teens. She became unruly and disobedient. She began to run around with what he had decided were a bad crowd. He could not believe it was Emma's fault, not even when he had visits from the police about her shoplifting. He even decided it must be something he was doing wrong. He could never think ill of his precious Emma. She would scream obscenities at him and show him the finger, but he still thought it was his doing. Years before, she was grateful for the gifts he gave her. Now, she expected things, throwing temper tantrums until she got what she wanted. As time passed, things just became steadily worse and worse, and Howard yearned for the days when his daughter would hug him and laugh with him like she did every Father's Day. Time passed, and he began to realize he could no longer blame others, not even himself, for Emma's behavior. It was obvious Emma was becoming more like her mother, Burn in Hell Brenda, a clone of the woman he'd grown to despise, and one bitch was enough. Howard would not suffer another, Certainly not his precious daughter Emma. So here he was. Another year had passed, again, and it was Father's Day. Howard checked the temperature of the water in the bowl, and draping the flannel over the edge, he picked it up. Making his way upstairs, he shouldered open the door to Emma's room. Walking over to the chair next to the bed and sat down. After wetting and wringing out the flannel, Howard began to gently bathe the stumps just below the knees where Emma's legs had once been. The legs that ran around with a bad crowd. He then began to bathe the stumps just below the elbows, where the arms and hands had been. The hands that had given him the finger. As he bathed her, he looked into Emma's eyes to see if there was any gratitude there. Her eyes had become a lot more expressive since the removal of her tongue. The tongue that had screamed profanities at him. All Howard saw were the cold eyes of Byrne and Hell Brenda staring back at him sneerfully. Draping the flannel over the bowl, Howard stood up and reaching into his pocket, withdrew a tape measure. Bending over Emma's dismembered torso, he began to measure her, smiled, straightened up, and began to sing. Daddy's little sugar lump, 4'2" from head to stump. At this point, Howard was sure he saw laughter in Emma's eyes. The hug was missing, but he thought, you can't have everything. Just Obey. Written by Logan Raul Baracho. I learned very early that people are softer than they pretend. Not emotionally, physically, but socially. A human being is a structure held together by habits and assumptions, and habits collapse under pressure. Mine just happened to be efficient. Skin-to-skin contact. That's all it ever took. A handshake held too long, fingers brushing a wrist when passing a document, a reassuring palm on a shoulder. The moment contact happened, something in them yielded. Not dramatically, no glowing eyes, no sudden obedience like in movies, just a subtle recalibration. Their thoughts bent around mine, as if they had always wanted to do what I suggested. I never called it mind control. That sounds theatrical. I preferred compliance. It was cleaner, truer. At the firm, it made me invaluable. Deadlines stopped being problems. Meetings ended the way I wanted. People agreed with ideas that they had argued against minutes earlier, and then thanked me for explaining it so clearly. Promotions came quickly, and so did the trust. I cultivated an image of calm competence, the kind that makes people want to lean in when you speak, and I never abused it. That's what I told myself, at least. And then the intern arrived. His name was Lucas, 22, maybe 23. Too polite, too careful. He dressed like he was afraid of being noticed. Neutral colors, and the sleeves were always a bit too long. The kind of person who apologizes, even when someone bumps into them. On his first day, I introduced myself and offered my hand. He shook it. Nothing happened. I didn't realize immediately. The failure was quiet. No resistance and no backlash. Just absence. Like expecting a door to swing open, and instead finding empty air where the frame should be. Lucas smiled, thanked me, and moved on. I stood there longer than necessary, my hand still half extended, heart ticking faster than it should have. That night, I told myself it was fatigue, stress, a misfire. Everyone has off days. The next morning, I tested again. I asked him to bring me coffee. I made sure our fingers touched when he handed me the cup. Porcelain warm, skin warmer. Thanks, I said, gently nudging the suggestion forward in my mind. Stay. Ask me if I need anything else. He nodded. Then he turned around and walked away. I watched him return to his desk and sit down, already absorbed in his screen. No hesitation, no confusion, no flicker of judgment. I didn't feel fear then. I felt curiosity. Over the following weeks, I engineered excuses for contact. I corrected his posture while reviewing his work. I leaned in close, letting my arm brush his. Once I pretended to trip and caught myself on his shoulder. Nothing. Every other person in the office still bent as easily as ever. Managers deferred. Co-workers mirrored my opinions unconsciously. Reality behaved itself, except around him. Lucas treated me with the same neutral respect as everyone else, maybe more. He thanked me for feedback. He smiled at jokes. He never seemed suspicious, never wary, just normal. That was worse. I started watching him. Not overtly, I'm not stupid. Just small things. How long he stayed late, what he ate for lunch, whether he talked to anyone else much. He didn't. I learned his routine the way you learn the rhythm of a machine. Predictable, unremarkable, and precise. I tested boundaries verbally next. Could you redo the section? I asked once, lightly pressing his arm. Sure, he said. He didn't redo it the way I wanted. I rewrote it myself later, hands shaking so badly I had to sit down. At home, I couldn't sleep. My ability, my constant, had a hole in it now, shaped exactly like one person. I kept replaying every interaction, every missed detail. Was it psychological? Some kind of resistance, or trauma? Medication? I considered the impossible explanations and discarded them. No, the problem wasn't him. It was me. I wasn't trying hard enough. Obsession doesn't arrive all at once. It grows quietly, disguised as problem-solving. I read papers on compliance, persuasion, neurological variants. I learned more about human anatomy and autonomy than I ever cared to know. I brushed his hand every day. Nothing. One evening, long after most of the office had emptied, I asked him to stay late and help me organize files. I closed the door behind us. The room felt immediately smaller. Lucas, I said, resting a hand on his shoulder, applying pressure this time, firm, intentional. I need you to listen to me. He did listen. His eyes stayed on mine, calm and attentive. Yes, he said. I pushed, harder than I ever had with anyone. I imagined his will folding, imagined his thoughts aligning, imagined the relief of normalcy returning. Nothing happened. "Are you okay?" he asked, frowning slightly. "You look tired." I let go of him as if burned. I laughed it off, apologized, and let him leave. That night, I followed him. It was raining. The city smelled like wet concrete and exhaust. He took the bus, sat by the window, headphones in. I sat 2 rows behind him, watching the reflection of his face ghosted against the glass. I memorized his stop, his street, the building where he lived, old, narrow, poorly lit. I watched him disappear inside. I told myself I wouldn't go further. But I went further. Breaking into his apartment was easier than it should have been. The lock was cheap. The hallway smelled like dust and boiled vegetables. I stood inside his living room, heart pounding, surrounded by the evidence of a person who existed independently of me. Books and dishes in the sink, a half-finished model plane on the table. He wasn't special, and that was the most terrifying part. When he came home and saw me, he froze, not in fear, in shock. "What are you doing here?" he asked. "I need you to do something," I said, stepping forward and grabbing his wrist. Skin, bone, pulse. I poured everything into that touch. Desperation, authority, command. Obey. Lucas didn't pull away. He looked down at my hand, then back at my face. "Let go," he said quietly. I didn't. "Please," he added. Not panicked, just firm. My vision blurred. I tightened my grip until he winced. Nothing. I let go. We stood there in silence, the distance between us suddenly enormous. "I don't know what you think you're doing," he said, backing toward the door. "But you need help." He left. He didn't scream and didn't call the police. Didn't even look back. I sank to the floor of his apartment and stayed there until morning. Since then, everything has unraveled. People still listen to me, still comply, but it feels hollow now, like performing a trick after someone has explained how it works. Lucas stopped coming to work. No one seems to know where he went. Sometimes, I think he quit. Sometimes I think he's following me, and watching me. I still feel his resistance in my hands when I close my eyes. That blank space where my influence should have been. I've started noticing others now. Tiny moments of delay, slight hesitations, cracks. Or maybe they were always there. Maybe Lucas wasn't immune. Maybe he was just the first person I couldn't pretend was. I don't know if I'm losing my ability, or finally seeing its limits. and I don't know which possibility scares me more. Mommy Sleeps in the Basement, written by Haley Hendershot. Speak louder, please. I put my hand up next to my ear from the back of the room, signaling that she would need to raise her voice. She took a deep breath. I could see anxiety turning her cheeks beet red as strands of blonde hair began to fall out of the same nappy ponytail she wore every day. There was something about her so familiar, but I just couldn't put my finger on it. With her face glued to the paper, too afraid to make eye contact, she quickly sputtered out, "Hi, my name is Paisley Jackson, and this is my poem called My Family." Paisley was a shy little girl. In fact, she was one of the quietest students I ever had in my 10 years of teaching. While I guess being the youngest of 11 will do that to anyone. Surprisingly, she was very smart, unlike the rest of her siblings, who were dumber than a box of rocks. Lord, the Jackson kids were such a headache, except for Paisley, of course. I just wish I could have given her more opportunities to improve her future. Don't get me wrong, I tried to help Paisley. I really did. I gave her clothes, food, and even had funds lined up for her. But living dirt poor in a shack out in the middle of the desert was a bad hand to be dealt with in life. Besides, no matter what I did, it wouldn't have made a difference. Everyone knows that the cycle of poverty is almost impossible to break. I crossed my legs, pen in hand, preparing for yet another bland story about a family I'd never get to meet. If you've ever worked with underprivileged kids, you'd know that guardian involvement is quite rare. When it came to interest in their daughter's education, Paisley's parents were no exception. I have two mommies. One named Betty, who can make good spaghetti. I call her Mom. She's the one that's married to my dad, Tom. One named Claire with pretty yellow hair. I call her Mommy. Dad calls her his project, his hobby. Being smack dab in the middle of Utah, I've seen hundreds of polygamist families, so this didn't strike me odd. Besides, even though polygamy is illegal, I try to keep my nose in my own business. Mom takes care of us all. She can do that because she's so tall. Mommy wears a pretty silver bracelet. She wears it because she's so famous. It wouldn't be the first time I saw kids coming up with stories about celebrity parents to add excitement to their ordinary lives. I just didn't expect it to come from Paisley. Mommy has me and Tommy. He's one of my older brothers. Mom is a lot older. She has all the others. I cringed. That meant that one of Paisley's mothers had given birth to 9 children. I couldn't imagine going through that many pregnancies. Dad says me and Tommy are a gift from God. He'll never hit us with a rod. His pride and joy is Tommy, but he says the only person he truly loves is Mommy. I looked up from my gradebook with the red line about a rod catching my attention. However, this wasn't the first time one of my students have accidentally reported abuse. Truth is, CPS picks and chooses who they want to help. Mom is having another baby. She's mad Dad wants to name it Daisy. Mommy can't have no more kids. Her last one died of SIDS. Shifting in my seat, I scribbled down a note reminding myself to deliver my daughter's old baby clothes to the Jacksons' shack. As a mother myself, I know babies can be expensive. Dad says she did it on purpose because she wanted to run off and join the circus. Mom says it wasn't her fault. I promised to keep that secret in the me and her vault. I shook my head in sadness. How could someone blame a grieving mother for something she couldn't control? Mommy was the one Dad chose. He watched all of her school shows. They were joined in the night. Daddy says inside her is a lot of fight. Mom is just a cover. Dad doesn't really love her. I threw my hands up, a gesture meaning stop I had taught to my students. But Paisley didn't look up. She continued to read, oblivious to my disappointed frown. Obviously, one of her siblings put her up to this joke. Mommy says she needs to get out. She wants to show me what life is all about. Dad gets mad. It's his biggest pet peeve. Mommy is sad. She just wants to leave. Mommy sings to me her favorite song. Mom says Dad's head is wired wrong. Shaking my head, I sighed. Another child with so much potential and such a kind heart was stuck in the middle of a lover's quarrel that didn't even involve her. Last birthday, I wanted to take Mommy to see her favorite basketball team. Mommy made me a cake with frosted buttercream. I got to go see the Knicks, but Dad said he made a mistake he couldn't fix. Nothing is the same anymore. I don't know why for sure. Now Dad cries at night alone. He asks God, "What have I done?" To Mom, he no longer tends. She hopes the baby will make amends. Paisley rose her head up with a smile, looking for my approval. Although I was appalled at the inappropriateness of her poem, I didn't want to break her spirits. She clearly was very proud of it, and scolding her for something that wasn't her wrongdoing was just going to send that little girl back into her shell that I'd been trying to break for months. So instead, I clapped, making the rest of the class, who were too young to understand the gravity of the situation, applaud as well. Mrs. June, I brought a picture of Mommy for extra credit. It's got one more part of the poem. Can I show the class? I nodded my head, thinking there couldn't possibly be any details worse than what she already discussed. Paisley reached down into the front pocket on her old, worn-out, hand-me-down dress, pulling out an old, aging photo. She flipped the flaking picture around, displaying it as if it were her most prized possession. My blood ran cold. I finally figured out why Paisley looked so familiar to me. In what seemed to be a school photograph, smiling ear to ear, exactly like Paisley, there was a young woman by the name of Claire Daisy. She was a high school student, popular for her ability to gain the lead in every school play, that went missing without a trace 12 years prior. She was last seen leaving the theater practice late one night, but then she just vanished. No sign of a struggle, no witnesses, no evidence, no body, nothing. Her case was covered on every news channel station in Utah for a while because of how peculiar it was, until people lost interest. Paisley happily continued. I was so in shock, I couldn't stop her as she read off the back of the picture. There is one thing I don't understand, and maybe you'll have the answer at hand. If Dad's love for Mommy will never sway, why did he treat her that way? Mom lays her head on a nice soft bed, but Mommy sleeps in the basement under a big slab of cement. The House on Jackson Street. Written by John Westrick. I used to walk with her. Now I walk alone. We used to marvel at the beautiful houses together. Now I look down at my feet. Each home a grain of salt in the wound. Each house a reminder of what I lost. Even though it hurts, I still find myself continuing our walks. Sometimes pain is good. I'd rather feel the pain of passing than not feel her at all. She's alive when I walk. She is the shadow that strolls behind. Though I can't see her, I can feel her. Her presence is like a windbreaker, draped across my shoulders in an especially violent storm. The pain isn't gone, but it's bearable when I'm moving. I can't speak to her, but she's there. When I trip over a root, a hand steadies me. When I veer off course, I feel a gentle nudge. And every day, I end up in front of the same house on Jackson Street. A grand home. At least, at one point it must have been. The windows are boarded closed. The door is locked. Beware trespasser signs are strewn haphazardly across the tangled mess of the once impressive lawn. I feel her presence strongest here. It is almost tangible, as if she's hiding behind the thin curtain. I call to her, yet she never answers. I reach for her, yet I can never lay hands on her. It is here, on my journey, where my emotions get the best of me. Every day I come. Every day I cry. The neighbors look at me with trepidation, but long gone are my days of caring what others think. I stand there, an old man, face in my hands, and weep for the woman I lost. Let them think what they want, but my Lenore was worth every tear. I feel a tap on my shoulder, and look up to see the front door of the house swung wide. Light is pouring out of it, and there she is, my Lenore. I rush towards her, and the gaping maw towards the woman I've lost. The woman who heard my cries and has returned for me. As I barrel forward through the brambles and overgrown weeds, I hardly am aware of the scrapes and cuts, nor does it bother me that I trip over a hidden bottle and go tumbling face first in the dirt. I sling myself forward with the stamina of a much younger man, and then I am there standing in touching distance from her. It's most definitely her. She's got the same strawberry blonde hair that always tended to leave me breathless. It's wrapped in a French braid with a daisy tucked behind her left ear. She looks younger by 20 years. Her nose and cheeks are dusted with a fine layer of freckles. I began to giggle like a schoolboy as I remember I once tried to count them. 23 is the highest I got, before I found my mouth on hers. And suddenly, I have an inappropriate urge to pull her close and continue the kiss in front of God and all the neighbors. Shortly before I do just that, she vanishes, leaving me standing in the front door, alone once more. I look around the hallway and notice it's fully furnished. There is no dust or decay. The parlor is in perfect condition. Even more shockingly, I hear someone playing the piano. It's for Eliza, and I could recognize that sound anywhere. Lenore was playing it the day she died. The Turkish rug leading down the hall looks familiar. The pattern of the wolf howling at the moon. The picture of the ship sailing in rough seas. I know it. I walk forward, no longer in control of my own body. Instead, everything begins to flash in front of me like a movie. I see my own hand reach for the gilded doorknob. I know on the other side of this door is a set of stairs that leads to the great room. Still, I don't remember. I can't remember. I don't want to remember. I'm back. Oh God, have mercy on me. I'm back to the day my wife died. I come to this conclusion even as my own traitorous hand throws wide the hallway door. I fight for control. I do everything in my power to not see. My eyes fling wide, and I look to see the back of my sweet Lenore's head. The damn Daisy still perched behind her ear. She's playing and she doesn't know I've arrived. I know what is coming, but I don't want to. Yet those damn feet, those mutinous motherfuckers, keep pushing me forward. First up one step, then two. Before I even know it, I've scaled half of them. Now I can see her back. She's in a flowery dress with what looks to be hummingbirds sucking at the honey. Fur Eliza is ramping up, and the song is nearing its climax. And then I see it. Him, to be precise. He's lounging in my chair, drinking my whiskey, with his shirt partially unbuttoned. Rage, white hot, fills me once more. I look to the left, and then the right, and then that's when I see my cavalry saber hung on the wall for decoration. I remember the outcome, yet I can't force myself to let go of its hilt. My hand turns white from grasping it so hard. There's nothing I can do to lessen my grip. I see myself marching up behind her, sword held high in one hand. Fair Eliza climaxes as my arm swings. I strike her left shoulder blade, and with a discordant whine, the music stops altogether. Inwardly I scream. I curse my god's damn temper. I watch as she slumps out of her chair. Without a second glance, I am charging the man just beginning to look up from his comfortable spot in my seat. My blade penetrates his right abdomen. He lets out one shriek before my second swing catches him directly in the throat. I am appalled at the blood spurting from his nearly decapitated neck. My hands are scarlet. I feel a wet stickiness oozing down my face. Yet, I can't control my own limbs as they swing and swing and swing, chopping the man into kindling. I try to close my eyes, but they won't, so I see his hand go flying. I watch as his innards come bubbling out of his abdomen. I split his head like a grape, and watch his brain matter leak out of the sides. To my dismay, I hear a gurgling sound coming from behind me. I turn, knowing what I'll see, but powerless to stop it. I looked to see my Lenore's face towards me, trying to speak. Blood bubbles drizzling out of the side of her mouth. I don't need to hear the words to know what she is trying to say. Please, no more. Pity fills my heart, and my own eyes refuse to cry. Please don't do this. I scream at myself in vain. I watch as I slowly move towards my former wife, letting the blade carve a wicked groove into the marble floor. With no mercy, my arm swings the blade up once, then twice, then 3 times, and all goes black. Finally, I regain control of my limbs and body. I look up to see a vandalized great hall with a nasty groove in the marble floor. And there, my chopped wife lying on the floor, looking up at me with dead, yet still very much alive eyes. I see the monstrosity of my late wife, clambered to her feet. Her left eye slides out of its socket, running like egg yolk down her face. Black pustule blood leaks from her wounds. Her right eye locks with mine, and in a slobbering wet noise she said, "I will never let you forget what you did here. Jail wasn't enough for you. You didn't stay your hand. So even in your Alzheimer's, I won't let you forget. Same time tomorrow, honey." Peripheral, written by Created Random. I still remember the night it happened. I was 9, and we were driving home from my grandma's house late. Rain pounding the windshield so hard that the vipers couldn't keep up. Dad was humming along to the radio. Mom was half asleep in the passenger seat. Then the truck came out of nowhere. I don't remember the impact, just the world flipping, the awful screech of metal, and then silence. When I opened my eyes, the car was on its roof, and I was hanging upside down, still buckled in. Blood dripped from my forehead into my eyes. My parents weren't moving. That's when I saw him. He was standing just outside the shattered window, barely in the corner of my vision. Tall, thin, wearing an old black suit and a silk top hat, like something from an antique photograph. He was walking toward me, slowly, hands clasped behind his back. I turned my head to look straight at him. He wasn't there, but when I looked again, there he was, back at the same distance he'd started, standing perfectly among the flashing red and blue lights, waiting. I blinked hard, thinking it was the blood in my eyes. When I glanced sideways again, he'd moved closer. A few steps, like he only advanced when I wasn't looking at him directly. I tried to scream, but my throat was raw. The paramedics were there by then, cutting me out, asking me questions I couldn't answer. None of them looked at him. None of them reacted when he took another step, while I stared at the ceiling of the ambulance. By the time we reached the hospital, he was gone. They told me my parents didn't make it. They told me I was lucky to be alive, a miracle, really. broken arm, some cuts, and a mild concussion. Nothing permanent. I never told anyone about the man in the top hat. I figured it was shock, trauma. Kids see things. I grew up, moved 3 states away, and got a job, an apartment and a cat. I drove carefully, always under the limit, never in bad weather if I could help it. I avoided that highway, and for 15 years, I never saw him again. Until last week. It was just a normal Tuesday. I was on my way home from work, stopped at a red light. When the pickup behind me didn't stop, it slammed right into my rear at full speed. I woke up on a backboard, neck brace locked tight. Couldn't move my head at all. I just stared straight up at the gray sky while paramedics shouted about spinal precautions and internal bleeding. And there he was, left side of my vision, just at the edge. Same suit, same top hat, standing calmly between 2 firefighters, like he belonged there. He started walking toward me. I couldn't turn my head, and I couldn't look directly at him. The brace wouldn't let me, so he just kept coming, step by step, patient, unhurried. The paramedics lifted the stretcher, loaded me into the ambulance. Every time my eyes flicked desperately around the tiny range they allowed me, he was closer, always closer. I tried to tell them, tried to warn someone, but my voice came out as a croak, and they just told me to stay calm, that I was going to be okay. The ambulance doors started to close. That's when the brim of the top hat slid slowly into the bottom of my vision. He leaned down, politely, like a gentleman removing his hat in greeting. His face was pale, almost kind, eyes like deep wells. "I'm terribly sorry for the delay," he said, his voice soft and old-fashioned. "There was a clerical error, you see. You were scheduled to leave with your parents that night, but somehow you stayed." His gloved hand reached toward me. "I've come to correct the oversight." The heart monitor started screaming. The paramedics rushed back in, shouting, paddles charging, but the doors were already shut, and the ambulance was empty except for me, and the man in the top hat finally sitting where he was always meant to. If you're reading this, maybe you think it's just a story, but check your rearview mirror tonight, and whatever you do, don't look directly at the edges.